Okay, hello Cloud Gurus, and welcome to the very last lecture in the S3 and IAM section of the course. So congratulations, you've completed your first theoretical and practical section of the course. So we're going to look at everything we learnt in this section. So we learnt that identity access management consists of the following. So it consists of users, groups, roles, and then you apply policies to these three different things. So you apply a policy to your users, groups, and roles. If you apply a policy to your group and you've got users within that group, they're going to inherit that policy automatically. Now, I know we didn't really cover off roles much in this section of the course. We are going to look at it in more detail in the next section of the course. We did create a role when we turned on cross-region replication. So if you actually go into IAM and have a look at your roles, you'll see a role there for cross-region replication. We also learnt about JSON. So this is what policies look like. So it's JavaScript object notation language. Now, IAM itself does not come up much in the Certified Solutions Architect Associate exam anymore. It's all been moved to the security specialty. That being said, you can't actually use AWS without knowing IAM, so it is really important to understand the core concepts of IAM and what users, groups, roles, and policies are. We also learned that IAM is universal. It does not apply to regions at this time. The root account is simply the account that's created when you first set up your AWS account, and it has complete administrator access. New users have no permissions when first created, and you'll find this is a theme within Amazon. It's called least privilege. So whenever you create a new user, that user is not going to have any rights or any privileges until you grant them privileges. Likewise, when we look at S3, when we create our bucket, it's locked down. It's not public, and making objects public is not that easy. You have to go through a process to do it. So that's a common theme within Amazon Web Services. New users are assigned an access key ID and secret access key when first created. These are not the same as a password. You cannot use the access key ID and secret access key to log into the console. You use it to access the AWS via the APIs and the command lines, however, and we are going to look at that in the next section of the course. And you only get to view your access key ID and secret access key once. If you lose them, you have to regenerate them, so make sure you save them in a secure location. So moving on, the final bits we learned about IAM is you always set up multi-factor authentication on your root account, and you can also create and customize your own password rotation policies. So moving away from IAM, let's look at S3. So remember that S3 is object-based. It allows you to upload files, and those files can be 0 bytes all the way up to 5 terabytes, and there is unlimited storage, and you store your files in these things called buckets, and it's basically just a folder in the cloud. Now, S3 is a universal namespace, so that means that your bucket names must be unique. You can't have test bucket because somebody already owns it. You can't have a cloud guru because somebody already owns it, and it's not me, sadly. And this is what the URL looks like when going to S3. So it's always S3, then the region, and then .amazonaws.com, and then / your bucket name. Now, remember that S3 is object-based storage, so it's not suitable to install an operating system on or a database or anything like that. And when you upload objects to S3 or files to S3, your browser is always going to get a HTTP 200 status code that the upload has been successful. Now, by default, all newly created buckets are private. You set up access control to your bucket using bucket policies, and bucket policies are bucket-wide. And then you can also use access control lists, and these can go down to the individual files or objects in your bucket. Remember that S3 buckets can be configured to create access logs, which logs all requests made to the S3 bucket. And these can be sent to another bucket in the same AWS account, or even another bucket in another AWS account. And we go into that architecture a lot in the security specialty. There's certain ways you can design your AWS infrastructure to be super secure using multiple accounts. Moving on, the key fundamentals of S3. So basically S3, you've got a key, and this is simply the name of the object. You've then got a value, and this is simply the data. It's made up a sequence of bytes. So sometimes people refer to S3 as a key value pair. We then have the version ID, which we saw when we turned on versioning. We have metadata, so we have data about data that we're storing, and we do that through tags. And then you get some sub-resources such as access control lists and then torrents as well. Now remember the consistency model going into your exam for S3. So it's read after write consistency of puts of new objects and eventual consistency for overwrite puts and deletes. And this can take some time to propagate. And like I said, what does that mean in everyday language? Well, if you put an object into S3, you're going to be able to read it immediately. If you overwrite an object or delete an object in S3 and you read it instantly after that, you could get the old version or you could get the new version. So sometimes you will get eventually the right version, but sometimes it takes some time to propagate. Then, seriously, this is a big exam topic. It's worth at least 4 or 5 marks. You have to understand the different S3 classes of storage. So we've got S3 standard. That's what most people use. S3 infrequently access. So this is where you want the same sort of durability and availability as standard S3. But you want to pay a lower fee, but you still need instant access to S3 infrequently accessed. We then have S3 one zone infrequently accessed. This is what's only going to be in one availability zone, so you have to plan for that. But it is a much lower cost. S3 intelligent tiering uses machine learning to move your objects around depending on how often you use them. S3 Glacier is for data archival, and you can configure your retrieval time from minutes to hours. And then we have S3 Glacier Deep Archive, and this is basically Amazon's lowest cost storage class, but you will have a retrieval time of 12 hours. Moving on, let's talk about encryption. So encryption in transit is achieved by using HTTPS and TLS. So every time you go and visit, let's say google.com, if you've got a HTTPS in the browser, that means that traffic is going to be encrypted. So if someone is in the middle trying to listen to that, they won't be able to figure out what it is you're viewing on Google. So that's how we do encryption in transit. So in terms of how this relates to S3, whenever you go to aws.amazon.com and you go into the S3 console, so long as you're using HTTPS, all the traffic, all the files that you're uploading are going to be encrypted. So that's encryption in transit. Now, S3 also has encryption at rest, and this is achieved by both the server-side encryption as well as client-side encryption. On the server side, it's achieved by 3 different ways. So we've got S3 managed keys. This is where S3 just handle all our encryption for us, and we don't have to worry about it. We've got AWS Key Management Service, or KMS. This is where we can start using keys from the KMS service, and we cover this in an awful lot of detail in the Certified Security Specialty. And then we've got server-side encryption with customer-provided keys. So this is where you provide your keys and you manage the encryption. And the actual maintenance of those keys. And then we also have client-side encryption. So this is where you encrypt the objects and then you upload them to S3. So that is encryption with S3 on AWS. Moving on to cross-region replication, basically you just need to understand what it is. It is definitely worth 1 or 2 marks in the exam. Versioning must be enabled on both the source and destination buckets. Regions must be unique. You can't do cross-region replication to the same region because then it's not cross-region. And then we have files in an existing bucket are not going to be replicated automatically when you turn cross-region replication on. All subsequent updated files will be replicated automatically. Delete markers are not replicated, and deleting individual versions or delete markers will not be replicated. So basically, going into your exam, it's really important to understand what cross-region replication is at a high level, and that's it really. Moving on to lifecycle policies. So what is a lifecycle policy? Well, basically, it automates moving your objects between the different storage tiers. That's all the policies are. And they can be used in conjunction with versioning, and they can be applied to current versions as well as previous versions. Moving on to S3 transfer acceleration. So we have our users, they're all around the world. We have our edge locations. Our users will upload their files to the edge locations first, and then those files will go over the AWS backbone network to S3. And we saw how mostly it can improve speed and performance. So if you do need to increase the performance of your, of your users being able to upload files to S3, look at S3 transfer acceleration. Moving on to CloudFront. So we learned what an edge location was. So this is the location where the content is going to be cached, and it's separate to an AWS region or availability zone. We learned what an origin was. This is the origin of all our files that the CDN will distribute, and this can either be an S3 bucket, an EC2 instance, an Elastic Load Balancer, or Route 53. And then we learned what a distribution was, and this is simply the name given to the CDN, which consists of a collection of edge locations. And then we have two different types of distributions. We've got our web distributions. This is typically used for websites. And then we've got RTMP. This is used for Adobe Media, and it's used for media streaming. Also, with CloudFront, we learnt that edge locations are not read-only. You can write to them as well, i.e. put an object to them. So we looked at that with transfer acceleration. And then objects are cached for the time to live, or TTL, and that value is always in seconds. And then you can clear cached objects by invalidating them, but you will be charged. So do remember that. Snowball, seriously, you just need to understand what Snowball is. So basically, it's a big disk that you can use to move your data in and out of the AWS cloud. And Snowball can be imported into S3, so you can import data into S3. You can also use Snowball to move large amounts of data out of S3. Moving on to Storage Gateway. Now, I did this exam just a couple of days ago, and Storage Gateway wasn't there. That being said, it does come up actually in the Solutions Architect Professional exam. So it is just important to understand Storage Gateway, and it may well still come up in the Associates. It always used to. It did for 3 years, so I don't want to risk not teaching it. So we have the different types of Storage Gateway. We've got File Gateway. This is used for flat files that are stored directly on S3. And that's NFS. We then have Volume Gateway, that's iSCSI, and we have two different types of volume gateways. We've got our stored volumes, and this means that your entire data set is stored on site. So it's literally a 100% copy of your data being stored on site, and then it's backed up to S3. Then also have cached volumes, and this is where the entire data set is stored on S3, and only the most frequently accessed data is cached on site. And if you get those two confused, just look for the word cache. That's all you need to see, or cache, however you want to pronounce it, whether you're Australian or American. We also then have Gateway Virtual Tape Library, and this is used for backups, and it works with really popular backup applications like Net Backup, Backup Exec, Veeam, etc. And it's a great way of getting rid of your physical tapes. And then finally, I would read the S3 FAQ before going into your exam, because S3 is going to come up an awful lot in the Solutions Architect Associate exam. So that is it for this section of the course, guys. You've done really, really well. We're going to go and look at EC2, which is Amazon's virtual machine service in the next section. We're going to learn an awful lot. We're going to start using the command line. We're going to start provisioning web servers, and it is an awful lot of fun. So if you've got the time, please join me in the next section of the course. Thank you.